broadcasting live from a shack on a hill in the Mossy Creek bottoms of Cane Creek, Arkansas. This is Lighting the Void live. We are also live on Fringe.fm. For all you guys, all you radio lovers out there, thanks for listening. And we're live on YouTube as well at the Lighting the Void YouTube channel. And we're going to get back into some more deep dives in broadcasting tonight. A long-time special guest is here with us. I would say I've been talking to this gentleman for about 10 years. That's 10 years I've been having this guy on the show, and every time he comes on, we get really good information about what's to come, what's going on in the skies, in our cosmic skies, as well as, you know, we need to take a deep dive into the future. And for any of you guys that know or don't know Jeff Harman has, like I said, he's been on this broadcast many times and is a trusted astrologer amongst several people. He's a world-renowned second-generation master astrologer, spiritual researcher, and paranormal investigator, deeply versed in ancient and traditional systems, known for working with everyday seekers, public figures, and celebrities for 50 years. And he does bring a lot of clarity to things and deep understanding. So, Jeff, man, it's really, really good to have you back. I haven't spoke to you in a while. It's good to hear your voice again, man. How you been?
I've been doing good, Joe. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's been a while. It has been a while. But I noticed now that you got your show and podcast. I know you were getting that up. You got your own channel. You keep us all informed on your channel. And
yeah.
I got to tell you, man, the personal reading that you did for me, that you've done for me, especially the doshas, the Vedic ones, have been pretty darn accurate, I'll have to say. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's interesting. You know, I was on a show last night and the guy was asking me and he says, what do you do to convince people that astrology is accurate? And I laughed. I said, I don't have to convince anybody that it's accurate. All you got to do, you know, is just check it out and you'll see the correspondences are definitely right there. That I was a skeptic when I first got involved with this stuff. And again, my mother was the one who introduced me to it. And I went, come on, you know, astrology, schmology, you know, how's this stuff going to do anything, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, we all hear the thing, you know, the doctor in the delivery room has more gravity than Saturn, right? And I always laughed at that. And when she told me, she says, check it out. She goes, you know, it's just energies that are happening in time. And time is such a mystery. And when I did, I went, wow, there you have it, you know. So, you know, I'm not here to convince anybody of anything, not at all.
Well, I mean, think about it. How many years that you've been doing this for, you know, like I always, just before we deep dive into the, you know, what's to come here, what are your thoughts on astrology today? Do you think it's evolving or do you think it's going in the right direction? Do you think it's getting too simplified? I mean, what are your thoughts about it?
Well, it depends who you talk to. I mean, you know, if you're dealing with pop internet astrology, where you're talking about sun signs and basic stuff connected to, you know, just aspects, it's pretty rudimentary. I think where the rubber really starts hitting the road is when you implement the ancient techniques. You know, for instance, when someone starts delving deeply into like you said, the Vedic dosha is another one that I've implemented, and I've been wanting to do this for over 40 years. It's called the Kala Chakra dosha, one of the oldest systems in ancient Nadi and Vedic astrology. It's absolutely fascinating. It's the infinite loop of time. You know, I always talk about time because I really think the Earth is a time machine, and I think all planets are time machines. When we're spanked on the rear end in the delivery room or whatever else they do to us, clearly that's when time starts for this lifetime. You know, that's when reality begins, is at that first breath. And the genetic journey, which for all of us is finite. I mean, none of us are going to live forever. It'd be nice if we did, but in these bodies, we don't. But the spirit does and the soul does. And this is where I really got attracted to the difference between modern pop astrology and the ancient stuff, particularly the Vedic and the Nadi astrology, but also you can't exclude the Egyptian, the Chaldean, the Hellenistic we could also throw in there medieval astrology, which was all really kicked in before the 1700s. And it actually kind of got watered down and lost. I think a lot of that was due to religious prosecution. When the religions really stomped on their feet was probably from the 1700s forward. And it resurfaced in fragmented, variants throughout the late 1800s. And definitely it's come back strong now. And I think, depending on who you talk to, there's a resurgence now of doing a lot of comparative analysis between sidereal, tropical, and all these plethora of techniques that are available in Vedic astrology, as well as in the traditional classical. So I think it's really evolving to, more learned camps.
Well, good. I've always been fascinated with it, how it relates to the soul. And now, since the very beginnings from 10 years ago when we first had our first show, I always try to check it out. When I have a weird dream, now I'm always checking where the moon, the sun is, that kind of stuff. Always.
What really blew my mind was my mother she was actually a specialist in hemodialysis. And so she was really into the allopathic medicine world, but she was also into the naturopathic world. And she started doing an analysis. Does astrology have any impact on health? And that's where we start breaking into the medieval, what they call, it's actually called medical astrology. And then, of course, in the East, it's often referred to as Ayurveda. And it's absolutely amazing. And I have to tell you, the more I research it, I've actually discussed this with doctors, and they're like, there is no reason for this particular energy to have come in on this person's body, but yet it corresponds precisely to these major outer transits. And, my mom, not only was she cool about that, Joe, I got to tell you a little trivia here. She bought me my first Led Zeppelin record in 1969. I'll never forget that.
Yeah, we've had our talks about Led Zeppelin. I know how big of a fan you are of Zeppelin, man.
Yeah, I love Zeppelin. I think they're awesome, and Pink Floyd too. But that's a cool mom when you think about that. She bought me my first Led Zeppelin record. She actually bought Led Zeppelin 2 and I think the third album or fourth album that had When the Levee Breaks. So that was pretty cool. But I have to tell you, it is a good one. I used to have a co-host, and we hope she'll come back. Her name was Ella. I don't know if you saw her on my channel.
Yeah.
But she had the Saturn-Neptune conjunction happen precisely on her ascendant. And I warned her, I said, this could be pretty difficult. And wow, it was. She has lost the motor skills in her legs and her hands.
Oh, man.
And it's been really rough on her. I mean, she, it's really been tough. But without getting into details, the Neptune is now retrograding and coming back, but it's not as strong as it was. And I've been bringing her to a neuropathic acupuncturist. There's a lot of good acupuncturists, practitioners out there, but this guy specializes in neuropathy, or I should say neuro connection to the nervous system and the brain and the muscular system. And he's actually healing her. And I took her to a couple other doctors too. And I told her, I said, nobody's going to figure out what this is because it's Neptune. And this is what my mother always used to say as well. She said, when Neptune comes around, making hard aspects to either the sun, the moon, particularly the ascendant, it often brings on strange, undiagnosable illnesses. And the allopaths will throw all kinds of tests at it and pharmaceuticals, which sometimes can have an effect. But it never seems to go away until those transits go away. And I'll make a prediction. I think she'll be healed up by the end of this year, beginning of next. And that's right when Neptune will finally get off of her ascendant.
Man, I want to give you a big thanks too, Jeff. So I started the show back in 2016, and it's had big ups and downs. Some of the biggest guests that I've had on this broadcast were from speaking to you.
Oh, wow.
You know, the Dos Glosa student Daniel Joseph came on.
Oh, yeah.
In the beginning quite a few times. I had, I think his name was Charles Swanson. I had on.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, that was Claude Swanson.
Claude Swanson, that's right. And we talked.
Claude passed away. You know that.
Yeah, I just heard about that. That's why I wanted to talk to you.
He passed away.
Fascinating show, man. You know, him talking about
Claude
the fields and stuff.
Guy.
And
loved him. He used to come over to my house in Tucson, and I actually have a lot of film clips from him that I'm going to be digging out in the future, because we would have all kinds of discussions. You know, he did some great research. He wrote a book called The Synchronized Universe. And I'm sure he talked about that on your show. And it's really a shame he's gone, because he was a hard left physicist who worked for DARPA, the government, and left that camp and really crossed over into, there's so many things we cannot explain. And he really did a lot of research on that and brought a lot of clarity to it. I'm so glad you had him on. That's a wonderful show. I would love to hear that show.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. It was years ago, but it was everything that you've mentioned on the broadcast. I've delved into the Kabbalah, you know, all of it, studied deeply into that, everything. Yeah. So you've been a big influence on this show and to our audience too. And I really want to say I appreciate it. I want to dive right in and say, look, I'm a little concerned about the things do not feel the same intuitively to me spiritually as they did a few years ago. I don't know if it's just me projecting some psychological stuff, but the AI world has seemed to be disconnecting us, and connecting to ourselves in ways as far as tools are concerned, but disconnecting us, you know. And then I feel like, do you feel that spirituality as a whole, as a consensus, or even astrologically, that we're heading in the right direction? Or do you feel are we taking a dip right now a little bit? Because there's war, there's stuff going on in the backgrounds that we're not really seeing right now, I think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no question. Well, you know, that's a great question that you brought up, because, you know, a lot of astrologers have been saying, oh, we're all going to leap off into love and light and all this stuff. And I have to say, I haven't been seeing that. You know, I heard this 50 years ago. Drembel Melchizedek invited me over to a friend's house, and you know, he said the same thing, that we were all going to leap into, you know, multiple dimensions of advancement. And this is what a lot of people have been saying with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And then there's also the Barbolt basket. I don't know if you've heard astrologers talking about this, but that was this alignment with Uranus, Jupiter, and Saturn. That was all happening. It's actually finishing right now as we speak. On the 31st of August, we will have the Jupiter Saturn trine. And that kind of completes the Barbolt basket. Now, for anybody that's listening, the Barbolt basket was named after a French astrologer. His last name was Barbolt. And he had cited this particular time in 2026. Well, he's passed away now. And in honor, they called it that. And many people have been saying, oh my God, this is going to be a period, you know, where everything's just going to be love and light and everything's going to be perfect. And like you just said, everybody's scratching their head and going, wait a minute. Yeah. I just pulled away from the gas pump here. And, you know, my wallet's about 10 pounds lighter. I go grocery shopping. I pay the bills, you know, and then we see nothing but war and dissension. And now we've got Iran making more threats than ever. And, you know, I said way back in, I think it was like March or April, that I didn't think this thing was that big a deal in terms of like a war. And then I thought it would be resolved fairly soon. And even though people say, well, it hasn't been resolved, you know, it's still going on. I think it has. I think this is much bigger than people realize. This is not just about Iran. This is, you know, and Donald Trump, I know a lot of people, you know, their hair stands on end when I mention that word, Donald Trump, or that phrase. But he is a very interesting and unusual politician. There's never been anybody quite like him in modern times, or for that matter, in any time that I can, you know, recollect here, just looking at history. And what's so unique about him is he's got a Raj Yoga Mars in the ascendant. Now, that's also what gets him in a lot of trouble and causes so many people to rail against him. He's got an exceedingly strong Mars right in the ascendant. And what's interesting is he was born in New York, but because he moved a little bit west to a place called, Pennsylvania Avenue, which is, of course, where the White House is, that's exactly where the longitude of his Mars astrolocation ascending line would be. So in other words, he moved into a more aggressive position by moving to Pennsylvania Avenue, which is, of course, the White House. Now, obviously, he goes to Mar-a-Lago and other places, but that's where he's doing business out of for the whole presidency. And, look at what's happening with Canada right now. There's literally, we could say, a trade war. And Trump is taunting this guy. I call him Commie Carney. Carney was actually in the Bank of England for quite a while. And he's got a very interesting background. And he's clearly, in my opinion, a new one world orderist. I mean, you listen to what he says, how he operates, and what he's doing, and most importantly, the actions he's taking. It's clearly, very antagonistic to Western society. He's been really potentially whitewashing a lot of imports from China and other places to skip the tariffs. And Trump has really put his foot down. And then you look at the intensity of sanctions that are going on with Iran. And of course, Iran is going to sit there. If there's one last person in that regime left, they're going to go down screaming, we'll never die.
You're holding on to that. That's what worries me is we got a lot of, I know warfare has changed for sure. There's a lot more of stealth war, more RCVs, drones, things like that. But, the fact that they're holding on to that straight so tight, which is, this thing with Iran's been going on for 40 years. If you talk to any guy that's been in the military for 20 or something years, they'll tell you. Oh, yeah. But, I talk to military guys all day at work, but the thing is like I feel it really heating up. So tell me about this, like Saturn, like secretly heating up in the background, So tell me about like the Saturn and Jupiter.
I think they want it to.
Trine.
That's what I think.
That's interesting.
Well, the Saturn, it's the Jupiter-Saturn trine. That'll be exact on the 31st, which is exactly 6 days from now. But here's the other one we got going on, the eclipse. So we had a total eclipse on the 12th. That was Ceres cycles, 10 south, very powerful eclipse. And we have the echo to it, which is the full moon partial eclipse happening 2 days from now on the 27th. So that's exceedingly powerful. So these eclipses stay hot for a long time. And this is an eclipse that's doing exactly what we're seeing happening now. It's very antagonistic, it's pushy, and it tends to bring things to a head. It makes people become very aggressive. I'm actually looking for the description of that. If you hear me turning away, that's what
your voice kind of faded out there, but yeah, I can still hear you.
It's because I'm turning around and grabbing a book off my bookshelf, which I now have in my hand, and I just want to reference. See, when I say Ceres cycles, if anybody's not familiar with that, see, the Chaldeans and the Vedas were masters at eclipses. Western modern astrology, we got an eclipse coming. It's a total eclipse, and it's going to last this long, and blah, blah, blah. It's in this sign and that sign. Well, the Chaldeans were much more advanced. They knew that these eclipses started at the north and south poles and that they didn't go away right away. This particular one, 10 south, began in the year 1179 AD. And it started at the South Pole. And what it does is it serpentines around the Earth happening at different times. So in other words, all these eclipses we see every year are usually from a family of eclipses that started at the North or South Pole. And see, this one right now, of course, is kicking in here as we speak. The full moon eclipse will happen on the 27th, which is 2 days from now. But the actual eclipse itself, which is the new moon, and that's the most stronger one, happened on the 12th. Well, here's the thing about this. What does it mean? What does it mean in plain English to us? Well, it has Mars on the midpoint of a new moon Pluto. Well, what does that mean? Well, that's fingernails on the chalkboard. That's a lot of anxiety, tension, and anger. A lot of pushiness. I can feel it in my own self. I can see it in traffic right now.
This is happening in 30 days, in the next 30 days?
No. It already happened on the 12th, and on the 27th, which is in 2 days, is the full moon answer. So you got to remember, the new moon is when the eclipse itself happened, but we're also going to get the full moon partial eclipse.
Okay, gotcha.
On the 27th. See, that'll happen literally what the 27th is. What is today? Today's the 25th. So it's in 2 days from now.
Yeah,
the
Thursday.
27th will be on Thursday, you see. So, yeah, it's right around the corner. And these eclipses are exceedingly powerful. They stay hot for a long time, sometimes up to a year or two. Well, this eclipse is about breaking out of very negative situations where there appears to be no hope. You notice, like you were just saying, a lot of people I'm talking to, and including myself, it just feels like, wow, there's no hope.
Yeah.
Everything's doom. Everything's gloom.
Yeah.
It's not going to get good. Well, here's what's interesting about this eclipse. That's the nature of this eclipse. But more interesting is it's happening in a sidereal star degree. See, this is what's so cool about ancient astrology. They knew it was all angels, spirits, and intelligences that lined up in these sidereal and tropical positions. Well, the sidereal position of this is exceedingly powerful because what it's doing is it's like someone shooting at a bullseye, trying to get something finished that's been very frustrating. Sound familiar, like what's happening right now. Mm-hmm. And then boom, right at the end, it breaks through and accomplishment happens. I've heard all kinds of stories. The news, you have to remember, the news in this country, you can't trust it. It's mind control.
100%.
Everyone's heard of MK Ultra. Well, let me tell you, you could say it is MK Ultra, like George Carlin said, beating you over the head with a big club telling you what to believe. I've heard different, that the Strait of Hormuz has been vacuum clean of all mines. They've either detonated them or taken them out. Further, I've heard that they're putting a lot of ships through there, that the actual passage of ships now is up almost 400% from where it was.
So the media is telling us there's a squeeze, but what's really going on, it's getting cleaned up, is what you're saying.
It's getting cleaned up. But here's the mysterious thing. Why aren't the fuel prices coming down? Well, we got the midterms coming. So this isn't, see, and I'll tell you, here's another opinion. And I've heard this from several sources. See, this goes back to World War I, and everybody's seen the movie Lawrence of Arabia. And if you haven't, you want to watch it. It's a great movie. So in World War I, there was the Habsburg Empire. They controlled so much. And what is interesting is that was destroyed. And many historians will say that no one can really definitively say what the hell caused World War I. Well, follow the money. And, I always mention this book. And if you ever want to read something that'll scare the heck out of you, it's free. You can download it. It's by David Webb. If you go to, I think it's called thegreattaking.com, or just Google that book, thegreattaking.com by David Webb. It's a free PDF download. And he was an associate of George Soros. And everybody said, oh, George Soros, he's the guy doing all the bad stuff. Well, yeah, he is. But he mentions in this text, he worked with George Soros in hedge funds. And George Soros used to tell him all the time, I'm not the top guy. The guy's way at the top. You can't believe how powerful they are. You can't believe the strings they can pull and the connections they have and the power they have with the money. Now enters the Bank of International Settlements and the London bankers and some others that we really don't know who's behind the Federal Reserve. Yeah. So roll the clock back to World War I. World War I was it precisely happened on a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. Every time I see Saturn-Pluto conjunctions, I always bite my fingernails a little bit, and I keep them pretty trimmed on for the most part. But the bottom line is, that's when World War I happened, and who rubber stamped that? Mr. Wilson. Wilson reminds me of Biden is an echo of Wilson, because there's rumors that they poisoned him and coerced him into this whole situation. The bankers took control. And of course, we've all heard the rumors about the Titanic and all that other stuff. Well, the bottom line is they own this place. And this is what The Great Taking discusses. There's another book that supports that also. It's called The Tower of Basel. And instead of Babel, Basel, right? And what is it talking about? Talking about the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, which no reporter's ever been allowed to go into. Some of your top world leaders are always in and out of this place. Rumor has it that one side of the table will host one country, and the other side of the table will host another country that's at war with each other. And they're both borrowing money to keep the war machine going. And Rothschild said it best. He says, I make more in one day of war than I do in a year of peace. War makes money. It generates things. It's hideous. But man, these people don't care about you at all. And now you get into the demonic factor. There's things far deeper, I think, that are connected with some of these folks that is a very demonic demeanor. They actually hate humanity. And we see this in the New One World Order versus, nationalism. And I think this is what's really happening right now. I think Iran is just the tip of the iceberg. And so is Ukraine and Russia. What's really going on, in my opinion, is the London bankers have been running the Mideast oil game for a long time, since World War I. And in fact, he talks about that, David Webb, in the book, The Great Taking. He literally says they caused the great crash of 1929. And he actually cites how they did it. They pulled the linchpin on one of the major New York banks, and the rest of the dominoes just fell right behind them. And because they're really smart. These people are not stupid. They're excellent at understanding the financial structures and needs of countries. And again, I think it was Rothschild said, you give me control of the money and I care less who makes the laws. These people, this is really, and I hate to say it, Pink Floyd said it best, it might be the root of all evil, money. And it certainly is an element of control that is absolutely intertwined with modern Western civilization.
Right.
And it is. If anybody's ever seen that movie, it's called The Gods Must Be Crazy. And I love that movie. It came out like 30, 40 years ago. It was about this guy flying over this Aborigine location, I think somewhere in Australia. And there was this culture of people that had never been exposed to Western society, right? The guy takes a Coke bottle and throws it out the window. One of the tribes finds the Coke bottle, and it's the only Coke bottle, right? And they all start fighting over it. And pretty soon, the medicine man says, this Coke bottle's evil because, before this, we all had everything equal. We lived off the land. Everything was perfect. And now we're all, fighting and having all this violence over this Coke bottle. So the medicine man says, I'm going to go to the end of Earth and throw it off. So the whole movie's about him going to the end.
He makes a good point. I mean, look,
he makes a good point.
If we can charge for it, we will. Water, air, everything natural is being charged for. Everything. What
did Reagan say? If it moves, tax it. Remember?
I mean, so you think, in your opinion, these are the biggest players on the planet?
Well, I think they're the most influential. I actually think it's maybe more like Men in Black than we know. I really do. I think, I was mentioning there's a race called the Naga race, and it's believed to be an underground serpent or hierarchical race. And it's interesting. You watch Lord of the Rings, speaking of another good movie, where you had these underground races. And remember, they were fearful of what the humans on the surface would do. In other words, a war with humans could affect the entire ecostructure of not only human civilization, but all civilization. And there's so much evidence. You look at things like Sasquatch and Bigfoot. I watched a really cool documentary that actually explained what happened to me back in the 70s. I was walking down a road. It was right in spring in northern Wisconsin. And I heard this crunching, right? And I look over to my right, and there's this huge guy. I mean, he was like gigantor. He's like 8.5, 9 feet tall. And I just froze. I go, wow. And he froze, and then he took off running, and he crossed the road. It was part snow. It was mostly melted snow. It was right in the, going into the springtime. He went into a thicket of brush that is so thick, I don't think you could have gotten a gerbil to run through that thing without breaking a branch. He didn't make a sound. And I was actually heading up. Yeah,
sure, that wasn't like an astral form or something like.
Well, no, he was real, because I heard the snow crunching, everything. They say these Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever you want to call them, they actually can jump dimensions. And some people have seen portals open up and they go into them. And this gets into the Vedas. There's actually, everybody says, oh, Vedic astrology. Well, the Vedas are much more than just astrology. It actually gets into the whole creational myths, very similar to the coded stuff in Genesis and the old Torah books.
Yeah.
Absolutely stunning. The Vedas talk about, particularly the Puranas and the Mahabharata, they get deeply into this. They're not just like saying, oh, there's races under. No, they literally talk about the hierarchy of kings and leaders that are underneath there. And they allude to the fact that they can dimension shift. Isn't that interesting? Some of them can even take human form, which, I was discussing that a while ago. I've actually seen people shapeshift. I was in Beverly Hills about 30 years ago, and I'm coming out of Magic Johnson was in there talking to his tax attorney. Whenever you get a lot of money, you better get a tax attorney. Anyway, so he was in there, and I came out, and I saw this person, it wasn't him, shapeshifted to like 7 feet plus tall. And it didn't look like a Bigfoot. It looked like some kind of a weird albino. And what freaked me out is I thought, okay, maybe I'm seeing things. I don't smoke, I don't drink, right? Don't do drugs. So I thought, okay, but I noticed that individual saw that I saw it. And that they acted very sheepish and headed right down the hall, got on the elevator, and we're out of there. And I had another event. We were doing some translations out of a text called the Sefer Ratziel. And the guy that I was working with was very versed in very ancient Azurite script Hebrew, which is a lot different than modern Hebrew and biblical Hebrew for the most part.
These ancient Hebrew symbols too, as well. Like not the.
Yeah, and there's cannellation marks on them, and there's codes and gematria, notricon in there.
Right.
But long story short, he and I are working on this, and I noticed his hand morphed into a claw. And I went, okay. And then he got all weird. He puts his hand under the table, and he got real sheepish. And then he said, I can't stay too long here today. And then he cleared out. So shortly thereafter.
All the times you've been on this broadcast, Jeff, you have never told me that story, ever.
But yeah. Oh, and I have more. Well, I forget half of them. I really do. I forget.
I would be petrified if I saw someone's hand turn into a claw. I'd tell them, like you did, your hand just turned into a claw.
And it really was wild because it looked like something, that you would see on an old Dracula movie or something. It's really wild. And see, this gets into some very interesting stuff.
Yeah, it makes you wonder about the counts of.
Well, David Icke has mentioned this stuff.
Yeah.
Princess Diana, she said these people aren't human. And there's been Joe Rogan has been mentioning this a lot on his show, where he says some of these people, I think they're reptiles. And, I have to say, there is strong evidence, and there's many of the African tribes that talked to. Sri Mukteswar was working with David Icke, and he talked about the same thing. So to think we're in a reality structure that is just like we all accept, I think is really
that's
a big
what
mistake.
I want to talk to you about. I feel like that. Yeah. I guess earlier what I was trying to say is a few years ago I was having, of course I was practicing ceremonial magic, the Golden Dawn stuff, which was, it can get dangerous, if you're not careful, these kinds of things. And, I could see into the spiritual realm. I was having experiences, synchronicities beyond measure. Everything was showing itself, right? And now I feel like I've stepped into the Truman Show almost. Where was
that ever since this March about?
Yeah, actually. I feel like it's the Truman Show.
Because
like it's
if
almost
you could see on my screen, Yeah, if you can see on my screen, I've got the Joe Roop birth chart up in Nadi Astrology. See, you're in a 7-year K2 Dasha right now, and you broke into that in 2023.
Yeah, I'm still in it.
You're still in it, and you will stay in it until 2030. Then you hit 20 years of Venus. So like throw the chart away, you'll be in much better spots there. But this March, you went into what we call a sub period, also known as the Antar Dasha of Rahu. See, so you're in the tail and the head of the dragon. Now, people listening to this, what that really means, these are the eclipse points.
The north and
Western
south
astrologers,
node of the moon, right?
That's right, north and south node of the moon, right? And what's important about this is ever since then, see, you can't, one shoe does not fit everybody. You have Rahu with the moon. That's why. You see, and Rahu will tend to block the emotional sensitivity of the moon. You see, so and also in what we call the Trim Samsa, they're together. So see, there's many harmonic charts in Vedic astrology. They literally would take a sign and break it down into many different mathematical divisions. They call them Vargas in India. And they have specific names, like the ninth harmonic is a Navamsha. That novena means 9. They have the Trim Samsa, which is 30. They have the Shastiansa, which is Shastiamsha, which is 60. I mean, I can sit here and rattle them all off. And it takes years to learn this stuff. And believe me, I make no claims that I know everything about this because I've never met a single person who does.
Well, isn't Hindu the oldest religion, Jeff? Like isn't in college, that's what I was taught.
The Vedas are way older than Hinduism.
That's where it comes from, though, right?
Hinduism
like their religion.
Is the religion. That's the religion. But Vedic astrology is far older than that, because the Vedas, no one really knows how old they are. A lot of scholars balk at this, but Brihat Horashastra, which is one of the more prominent core texts in Vedic astrology, was believed to have been penned 5,000 years ago. And in that, Maharishi Parashara, who's the one who's believed to have written that thing, references stuff that's thousands of years before that. It's kind of like the Sefer Ratziel, that means the book of the Archangel Ratziel, who talks about angels ruling all these different areas of heavens, each quarter of the moon, each season, how these myriads of angels just change shifts, even sunrise, noon, sunset, and midnight. Now, does anyone ever stop to think of what it takes? I mean, go take a shovel of dirt a few times and let me know how you feel after you shovel for about 15 minutes. Can you imagine to keep something this massive rotating on its axis? And I do believe we are a planet. I don't think it's flat. I do question, though. I do believe that they have found a lot of interesting stuff with these ice walls, Antarctica. I think it's a lot different than they're telling
Jeff,
us.
Please don't tell me you're going to the flat Earth, brother.
I'm not. But I think there's some things that have been brought up in some of those camps that deserve answers.
Looking at, Well, to me, that could be conscious related. Like you used to tell me the, Phantom. I remember the Phantom, wheels within wheels, like this idea that everything's being programmed from the spiritual world, and it's a perfect balance, a creation that we can't even fathom. Imagine if it was a simulation, imagine a program so complex that we couldn't even wrap our minds around it, that's balanced on a perfect divine level, right? But yeah, like so the Truman Show thing, are you saying that could be just my chart, like just my stuff, not the world's, not society, not,
I mean, I'm sure has an effect on that. No question. I mean, this last eclipse actually just happened in your 12th house. You see, so if you look at your birth chart, the eclipse that we just had back on the 12th was in your 12th house. So, and that's actually, what is it? It's third from the moon. So, and it's in the fire trines. See, there's so many secrets to astrology. I have to say, I won't live long enough to fully fathom I mean, the angels have to laugh at us because, the more I get to know, the more humble I get. I realize this stuff is beyond human comprehension. And it truly, truly is. Yeah, that eclipse happened for you. And see, you can actually look at the exact degree and minute in the sidereal systems to see where does that line up in your chart. Actually, let's see, that was August 12th. Actually, it happened in your 11th house. It happened in the sign of the moon. So yeah, I'm looking right now. It was right on the edge of it happened right on the cusp of your 12th house in the sidereal zodiac. So, these eclipses will affect everyone differently. There's no question
that's
about
okay.
that.
Because I will say that in the mainstream media on the internet, like you brought up earlier, Joe Rogan, I'm starting to, Thomas Campbell's on there. So now they're discussing things like the out of body experience, what consciousness really is. I heard another guy on there the other day speak about Dr. Ibrahim Karim when discussing biogeometry, things of that nature. So I feel like intellectually we're getting there, but I can't help but feel a disconnect, and maybe it is just my chart. I don't want to have to go deep into my chart or anything, but it does show how we do project our reality.
The head and the tail of the dragon, and you actually leave that. You should feel a huge shift. March 20th, if this birth time is right, because I have you down at what 7:01:48. I think I have you at. In terms of your birth time. But it clearly, in my opinion, there is so much that goes on in all of our charts. I was studying a lot of different remote viewers who would hit their targets. And some of these guys were really disciplined. I mean, they were military guys. And we found that definitely it had a huge effect on each individual where transits and progressions were in their chart.
Really?
In other words, they'd be really accurate when they had good transits and progressions going on, but they were affected when they had malefic stuff really happening. And we also found a lot of correspondences to the positions in the rotation of the Earth as it lined up with different celestial configurations, especially the moon. One of the most mysterious types of astrology, I mentioned it earlier, is called Kala Chakra Dosha. And every physicist talks about the infinite loop of time, right? Einstein talked about this. And of course, that's the famous figure 8. And there's something called a Mobius strip, if anyone's ever heard of it. In physics, there was a man named Mobius, French physicist, and he actually talked about how time literally turns itself inside out with these cycles. Well, enters the Kala Chakra Dosha. It's much, much different than any of the other doshas. It's sign-based, and it's based off when you drew first breath, when you exited your mother's womb. See, whenever any of us took in that first breath of air from the oxygen of the world, it's really interesting because Archangel Michael rules fire. Well, who rules air? Raphael. You see, so spirit goes into air, which is Raphael. Then we have the next one denser down, Gabriel, water. And then you have the most dense layer, which is, of course, the earth. And physicists laugh at this, but ultimately, when you think about it, everything can be broken down into those 4 categories of molecular existence or substances.
Yeah. I've always believed that.
And the entire universes are just energy. And this is where the Garden of Eden story, the Bhagavad Gita, the Vedas all talk about this. There's Egyptian legends to this too, where there was a war in heaven. And the evil spirits were cast down. They lost. Well, they're imprisoned in matter. Think about this. Everything in the physical realm will be born, it will grow, it will mature and experience, it will atrophy, and it will pass away in the physical realm. I don't care if it's alien, human, if it's animal, plant, mineral, all those kingdoms sooner or later will atrophy and exit its genetic structure, whatever it is. And they actually say the universes get destroyed every 4.3 to 4.6 billion years. Now, I often wonder, where's that time reference? Is that Earth years, or is that galactic years? Is that divine years? I mean, time is such an interesting thing. If you think about time, and that's, again, I love Pink Floyd, that song Time, because it's a morbid look at our perception of reality and life, ticking away the moments of the dull day. The lyrics are just ingenious. But if you think about it, sunrise, noon, sunset, and midnight are our clock. If you were to alter that, I mean, everything is divisible off that. The year, the month, the day, the second, the millisecond, the nano, everything.
They say, Jeff, that back in the day, I hate to cut you off, I'm sorry, but back in the, I'll lose the thought. Back in the day, they say, well, we've evolved. I don't necessarily think so, man. I think, like you say, the Chaldeans, the Egyptians, when I read their texts, they knew all this stuff. And matter of fact, their ceremonies and rituals were based on where the sun was, where they felt something that was very important about time, and that it needed to be, I don't know, not worshipped, but admired at certain times of the day. Yeah.
Revered. Yeah. I mean, you think about, in this dawning age of AI, we're all enamored, and look at how many people now, AI has become their little friend. Well, let's ask ChatGPT, right? Or AI. And I have to admit, I'm doing some coding work right now, developing some software apps that's stunning with AI. I mean, I used to hire guys doing software work. And I'm going to tell you what, they don't hold a candle to what this new AI can do.
It's still learning. It's still learning too. So, yeah.
It's going to get like Terminator here in another 5 years. And that was an ingenious script. And Terminator 2 was absolutely ingenious when you think about, that whole concept of what could happen with all this. But anyways, back to what I was trying to say here. AI will never be what you and I and everyone else listening is. And that's a spirit having a physical experience. Right. AI can get as logical and as fast and draw in all the data it wants. It's never going to have empathy, emotion, and feelings of love. Now, it can be programmed to act like it does. It can use all the accolades and, politeness it wants in any language, but it's never going to feel like you and I do. It can't. It's a machine. And this is the scary part. It's all about logic. It's completely about logic. And anything it has is going to be programmed in that sense. And I can tell you, give me a second here. There we go. I had to turn something off. What is so divine about creation, getting back to the Garden of Eden story and the Vedas, they literally say creation implodes upon itself. And this gets into the demonic spirits. I think they're imprisoned in matter itself. Not to sound graphic, but when you get done eating and you throw your leftovers in the garbage, go look at it. About, a day later, you'll see flies and larvae on it. It's gross, right? Yeah. Decay. They actually say the evil spirits, there's all these different classes, are forced to actually cause this. And they're actually forced to support and sustain the entire physical universes. That's why, there's a lot of talk these days about dimensions and dimension jumping. A lot of these extraterrestrial crafts, they're saying, did you see the Age of Disclosure yet, Joe?
Not yet.
Oh, gotta watch that. That, for anybody listening, you got to watch the documentary, The Age of Disclosure. It's about all these people in the government, the military, and industrial complexes, as well as scientists who are coming forward and saying, look, folks, not only are we not alone, the governments have been working with them for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And I think culture. Yeah. And I mean, it's please.
Well, they're dumping all these files on us now that it doesn't really show anything, though. I mean, it does.
Well,
but
that's because they're withholding. They're withholding. And see, Trump it's very noble what he's doing, whether you like him or hate him. I think it's great what he's doing. But here's the problem. You can't make an executive order or a government issued order that's going to affect somebody in the private sector. And that's what Eisenhower warned about. He said all these exceedingly powerful officials who are now spilled back into this industrial military complex, and almost like a second shadow government. When ain't almost, like it is. And this is where they're withholding all this information. They do not want it out. And I think a lot of them, meaning some of these extraterrestrials, are involved right in it. I mean, I think there was a movie back in the 80s. People may have remembered. It was called They Live. Remember?
Oh, yeah.
If you put on these glasses,
Yeah.
you'd see the faces that were alien-like. And of course, it was a movie, so they had to make it look graphic.
It's a good
and
one. And
there were, all these billboards and signage that would, say different messages than what it said. Well, now enters your iPhone, your TV, your iPad, your Android. What do you think is really going on? I mean, especially with 5 and 6G now, they're saying that technology is so advanced, they can take your blood pressure without you knowing it, let alone, and talk about, affecting thoughts. That in the wrong hands could be very, very dangerous.
And those flock cameras, whatever they're called too, those things that they actually got Bluetooth technology that can tap into your phone, all kinds of stuff.
You bet.
There's citizens getting arrested for trying to take them down now. I've seen a bunch of those videos too. So, yeah, I mean, I did want to talk to you about that. Is there a planetary, and when I was thinking about influences, I was thinking about maybe Mercury or something. I'm not sure, but is there a planetary influence into the technological world in that sense, or is that of our own creation?
I do. I think the outer planets, the Kabbalists will kind of maybe agree with me on this. The traditional astrologers, which is your pre-1700 astrologers, and also the Vedic astrologers, do not use Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto. But what's interesting is there are evidence that they knew that they existed, and not only those, but other shadow planets. And they're actually used in some of these ancient techniques, both in traditional classical as well as in the Vedic stuff. And where am I going with this? Well, every time we seem to get alignments with Saturn, which, the Greeks used to call Saturn Kronos. Kronos, even though there was legends, he killed and ate his babies and all that, but Kronos was also the Lord of time. You see, that's what it means, time. And if you look at the glyph of all the planets, they come from 3 symbols: the circle, which is used for our sun, the crescent, which is used for the symbol of our moon, and the cross, which is time and space, or the planet Earth. See, sunrise, noon, sunset, midnight, the 4 angles in any birth chart. Well, here's what's interesting. All the rest of the glyphs of the planets come from that. What is Saturn? Saturn is the cross over the crescent of the moon. And one of my favorite documents to refer to is a text called the Sharar HaGilgum. And Share or Sharar in Aramaic and Hebrew means gate. And HaGilgum is a word that means recycling or transferring the souls. And this text it's not that old. It was written somewhere in the 14th century, 13th or 14th century. And many people may recognize Rabbi Luria was the one, and he's often been revered as one of the more advanced, sources for some of the ancient Kabbalistic stuff, all the way back into the Hermetic traditions. And his teacher was a guy named the Ari. And this book actually says the teachings of the Ari Zel. And he was a man who was born blind physically, could not see anything his whole entire life, but he could see your entire history of your soul into the Akashic records. And, this gets into what you were talking about earlier. Our mind is really an attenuator. And this has been talked about by a lot of parapsychologists. And I love hanging out with psychiatrists and psychologists because we really get into some deep discussions and comparative analysis with some of these ancient, look-sees into cycles and astrology. Well, what's interesting, when we're born and we draw in that first breath, there's a mark that is made between the nose and the upper lip that's referred to as the mark of silence. In fact, if anybody wants to check, it's in a text called the Sefer Haggadah. The Haggadah has always been referred to as the verbal tradition of legends by the ancient rabbinical texts. And Sefer, of course, means book. So this was actually penned. You can get it on Amazon. It's an elegant text. It's a bunch of different metaphors, but it talks about an angel ties the soul to the embryo at conception, not at birth, at conception. And that period of gestation, while the genetic vessel is being prepared with inside of the mother's womb. And that gets deep down the rabbit hole, because why do we look like our parents, some of us? Why do we have genetic connections that we can trace DNA back generations, right? You can see all this stuff. So now enters this whole elements of karma. And what is astrology? Well, we're not our astrology. The astrology seems to be transmitting the connection to the upper soul roots outside of time and space. And this gets into the tree of life above the celestial influences of the so-called heavens, if you will, where the actual time and space exists in many different dimensions and realities. They actually say the planets are connecting almost like a portal to your soul root and the fragmentation that happened to the soul root outside of time. And that's beyond any human's comprehension, certainly beyond mine. Well, what's interesting is the transits, the progressions, and the doshas all seem, the first 100 days of life, all the celestial influences and changes will actually play back out in reverse over the next 100 years, if you live that long. And this was known by the Egyptians, the Chaldeans, the Vedas. They're called secondary progressions, and they're breathtaking. However old you are, if you're 40 years old, or if you're 80 years old, or if you're 60, whatever you are, that's the amount of days. If you went back and looked where you were born and took all the celestial influences, that amount of days is exactly where the moon will be. Like if let's say someone's 50, right? So you could roll the clock back 50 days and, or forward from your birth time, not back, forward from your birth time. And you would find that the secondary progressed moon and all the aspects and all the other things that are going on, like if Mercury went retrograde, some people are born and a planet goes retrograde right afterwards. This is all astrology and it's very heady. But when you stop and you think about this isn't just astrology. This is a matrix that's interacting with the soul in its journey in time and space genetically. And all these genetics are flowing down into the mother's womb and magically forming this incredible vessel that we all have. I mean, look at a little baby. I mean, they're magical. When they come out, they're just so precious. They smell great too. My kid, I love smelling my little boy when he was born.
And their eyes are, they're little. You'll never see their eyes like that again. I mean, for a few days after they're born, maybe, but then there's a glow that starts to kind of fade a little. It's hard to explain. I seen it in my son. I was like, whoa, when I looked at his eyes, when he was born.
I was in a delivery room. In fact, that story I just told about the angel tying the soul to the embryo at conception, they say we're in converse with this guided or guardian angel, however you want to say it. Right. And there seems to be a lot of them. And when we exit the mother's womb and the umbilical cord is cut and the first breath is taken, they say they knock us out. That's why if we become wired to the three-dimensional five-sense world, you see the sight, the touch, the smell, the hearing, all that is all wired in now to this dense lower realm. If we could see all the angels, the spirits, the intelligences, the elementals that are around us, the Magus Astrophilus talks a lot about this stuff, and so do many others, Robert Monroe and Edgar Cayce, all these people. If we could see that, we'd probably flip our cookies. I don't think you could walk across the room if you saw all the spirits and entities that are literally right in the same space we are. And you couldn't drive a car. So God might have done us a favor knocking us out. And that's that little mark that the Sefer Haggadah talks about. And that's when we start developing the lower conscious mind, which in Vedic astrology is ingeniously referred to as the manas of the mind. And you can tell the personality traits by the lunar mansions, the aspects, and the traits of the moon. It's quite profound. And this is way past sun sign stuff. And you can look at the divisional charts too. Well, what's fascinating to me is that in the Sharia Gilgam, it says the lower conscious mind. I actually have a tree of life. We're doing audio only, but I could show you this diagram.
Yeah, I've shown them the tree a lot so that they're familiar with it for sure.
Yeah. Well, this is a tree that's specific to the Sharia Gilgam. And it's different because it divides the conscious subconscious mind, but then underneath the moon, or I should say in between Venus and Mercury, there's another dashed line that divides in something the Sharia Gilgam refers to as the nefesh.
Yeah, the nefesh.
Now that's a strange Aramaic word that just means it's your lower conscious perception of reality. This is the one everybody runs to, a therapist or a consult or, like in tool time, the guy
it's
that's
the one
on the
running
other
the
side.
show most of the time when you're going through troubles, for sure.
You got it. It's the lower perception of this dense reality, but it's not us. And the religions, in my opinion, have really failed at communicating this. And the Sharia Gilgam lays it out elegantly. And we all grow up with our experiences, and the lower human conscious mind is incredibly intelligent. I mean, when you really analyze human intelligence, we're really smart, all of us.
Yeah.
I mean, you take a little kid, look at what they absorb, and they start, it's so cute when they mispronounce words, but by the time they're 7, they don't mispronounce them anymore. Because they're now aware that they're being laughed at for doing that, even though we thought it was cute, right? So
extremely adaptable.
And now you get it totally adaptable.
Yeah.
And now computers and AI is just like that. It's literally like a magnet. It just grabs all this data and starts assessing it. And so the lower conscious mind is actually an attenuator from the soul. And the Sharia Gilgam alludes to this. See, the next one up is the Rosh, which is the spirit. Who is thinking right now about your stomach digesting the food you just ate earlier today, or your blood pressure, or all the stuff that your immune system is doing? The human body's miraculous.
Is that how it's pronounced, Rosh? I always thought it was the Ruach, but I know what you're talking about.
Well, there's different camps. I get chastised by that too. There's certain people who call it Ruach, and there's other people who call it Rosh.
Right.
And you can jump on the internet and hear it pronounced both ways. But it depends on which dialect camp you're in. I kind of like the Rosh pronunciation, but whatever, you can. Yeah, but I know I've had a lot of people. Well, it's called the Ruach. Okay.
But, you know what I'm
whatever.
talking about, though, right?
Yeah, it's the spirit.
Right.
It's the spirit. And then the next one up is called the neshama, which astrologers would call Saturn. And this is where I say it's the karmic gunny sack we're dragging around from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. It is the root of what keeps us locked into time and space. And this is very interesting because the Sharia Gilgam speaks to how many souls will keep reincarnating here. And some of them into some pretty difficult situations, others into opulent situations. Of course, look at the world. We see
crazy that you say that because, like, Robert Monroe talks about the same thing. He's not a spiritual guy per se. He took, the out of body experience from like a scientific whatever point of view. But he does say that when people leave, we become incredibly addicted almost to having to work things out, things that we haven't done or we didn't do or whatever. And I'm hearing a story from the spiritual camp and a story from the conscious explorative science camp, once again, saying the same thing, Saying
the same thing.
Yeah.
So you got it. And now here's what's interesting, and this is where the religions were really correct. Does prayer, does meditation, does intention matter? I think absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Dr. Emoto proved it. We emit thought form elementals out of the third eye chakra. Daskalos, the Magus of Strovolos, talked about that, how they go out into our aura and they return back to the base of the spine. But that's the physical loop. those samskaras, the Tibetan lamas were really into this stuff, and so were the ancient Vedas. They knew the thoughts you thought. Now, many people call this physiognomy. That's why people look how they think. You literally start to develop, and physicality is so influenced by thought. And this is why we go back to look at Tony Robbins, look at Zig Ziglar, look at Napoleon Hill, all these people. Think positive, right? Set goals, make millions. Okay, which is good. There's nothing wrong with that. But Daskalos in the text called Esoteric Practices is doing something very ingenious in that book. He's training you to train the lower conscious mind to do what the spirit does and to break out of its myopic reception and start to be generative. Well, back to the Sharia Gilgam. The Sharia Gilgam actually talks about when a soul becomes two things. One is, it seems like the earth is a grounding rod. If you ever worked with electricity, you'll find out real fast if you don't have ground, right? If anybody has a trailer and their trailer lights don't work, try not having ground, or your ground terminal in your car gets, all corroded. You don't have a circuit. Well, that's what it seems like life on earth is that we are grounding rods. Time and space seems to ground out all of this energy that's not only connected to our souls, but to our soul roots. So, a lot of people say, why the hell was I born to this guy or that, that mom? Right? Don't we all say that now and then? I got to tell you a quick story, Joe. My first boss was a drill sergeant in World War II. My very first job doing carpentry work was in the 70s. And that's when I got my social security number, right? And all that, got taxes taken off. And he was intense. He was a drill sergeant. And if you weren't out there at 5:30 in the morning, he would literally march in my house and throw me across the room out of the bed.
He's a beater.
And he was a nice guy compared to my dad. and I'm not kidding either. My dad was amazingly intense. He was worse. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You get the same dad. So where I'm going with all this is we're all in these environments. We go, how in the hell did we end up with this relationship or this situation, job, or life experience? And a lot of it is shown in the astrology that we are grounding out energies. And the Sharia Gilgam speaks that two things seem to allow us to escape from Alcatraz. One is the dissipation of karma, but most importantly is conscious awareness of the game. And when the soul becomes self-aware, that changes. The most powerful thing in the universe is human reaction. Think about that. If you're driving a car, if you see the guy who's doing something wrong, which everybody does once in a while, they'll run a stoplight, right? They'll turn into your lane, whatever they do. I know I drive a motorcycle, and believe me, you better be paying attention or you'll be dead. And you know what? Reaction is everything. You don't get mad, you react. We have two options. We either, go like a bull in a china closet forward, just breaking everything around us, or we stop and start becoming self-aware and reaction. And more than that, we also have to take and understand this game. The Sharia Gilgam says that when certain souls really, really become on the spiritual path, it's almost like Indiana Jones. Remember when he was down in the snake pit and he says, God, I hate snakes, right? And somebody dangles a rope down because he had no way out. And they say that souls that are connected to our soul root will actually come and help us out. And some of them join us. This is why the rituals, everybody thinks, bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah is just for Judaism. No, it's not. They actually have that same ritual in the ancient Vedantic and Tibetan lamas and many ancient cultures, because they knew that's when the young soul would be joined by another nefesh or rosh or neshama or a higher soul. And there's this whole hierarchy the Sharia Gilgam talks about. And nobody can disprove or prove this stuff, but it's so much deeper than just
it makes sense too. Like you think about all those rabbis meditating, they had to have had some extrasensory experiences. Me, myself, having the out-of-body experiences I've had, what does the physical body feel like when you're leaving it? It feels like a weight, like a magnet. Yep. Anybody that's ever had an OBE, you feel a vibration, and then as soon as you get out of your body, it feels heavy, like you're being pulled towards it. And you have to get away from your body quick, or you're going to go right back in. And then when you're out of your body, the minute you give into astonishment, have an emotion, you're not balanced, you're back, right? Like you have to be calm and observatory, chill, nothing bothers you, no fear, no too much excitement. And that allows you to move in that realm, which is why it makes it so incredibly difficult. You see, so I think when those rabbis were meditating and they said, that's just my opinion, I'm curious what you think. Some of them probably had some OBEs, and they're like, look, this Malkuth, this Nefesh, this down here in this earth, this is a dense magnet of some kind.
Oh, you bet.
You
bet it is. Yeah, absolutely, Joe. Yeah, it does. Well, I think they out and out had angels visiting them. In fact, the lamas, the rishis, there's a term in ancient Vedic astrology. They were called the rishis. Well, translate that into English. Look it up on Google. Rishi means the seer. They literally were having converse with angels. One of the most compelling texts I mention a lot is a text by Rabbi Maharil, which is also known in many magical circles as the sacred magic of Abramelin the Mage.
Oh, yeah.
And that book is stunning because the one Mathers did, who was actually one of the founders of the Leaders of the Golden Dawn, was actually a decent translation, except he translated the wrong book. But the better one is one by Goethe, I think his name is. He did an elegant job translating. He actually proved that the book's true. And the book gets into what a lot of the traditional Judaism still practice, and that is the Passover, which Christianity has as well. The Passover is the first new moon closest to the spring equinox. Then you have 6 lunations, which just means new moons, months, right? And when you get to the fall equinox, the closest new moon, or the 6th, closest to the fall equinox, is the high holidays. Well, the ancient methods, forget the religions, was you would purify the soul, you would get away from humanity completely, and you would purify the soul through prayer and ritual in a sanctuary for 6 lunations. You actually were supposed to do it 18, and there was many variations of this. But this was what the ancient saints did. They would purify the soul for those 6 lunations, and on the 6th, if the soul was truly purified, the guardian angel would appear to you and teach you how to control the evil spirits. Now, that's not something you can learn in a ritual or grimoire. That is, if your soul ain't pure enough, that angel's not showing up. And if the angel doesn't show up, you'll never get the keys to do that. And there's been a lot of dispute about that,
Jeff. Have you seen it? The movie about the Abramelin ritual? There's a whole movie.
I haven't seen the movie, but I know a lot. No, was there a movie? I didn't know.
Oh yeah, and it shows what you're talking about. I mean, a guy and a girl go to this house. They do the Abramelin ritual. She's trying to contact her holy guardian angel, and she has to go through. I won't spoil it, but you know the ritual. She has to go through quite a bit to even get into the presence of that angel.
Oh yeah.
It's a pretty crazy movie.
Yeah, they say out of thousands of people, maybe only one might have the angel appear. It has a lot to do with the purity of the soul. And see, the physical world is such, think about it. It's really attractive. You have all the sexuality going on between the sexes. You have money, you have opulence, you have material goods. We are all drunk with the physical world. Here's something on, if anybody will go to my YouTube channel, Jeff Harman Astrologer, and you'll find last year I had a lady on. It's in the archives, Laura Hirsch. She is an amazing lady. She works with the doctor who did the telepathy tapes, and I'm sure you may have heard of that. If you haven't, check them out. That's so cool. And the telepathy tapes are all about proving that these autistic children are telepathic, and they're much more. Now, this gets back into the Sharia Gilgum and the mark we all have beneath our nose, how we were knocked out. Because these children didn't develop their minds in the same linear path that we did, guess what? They're finding there's a device called spelling to speech, which allows these children to use this very simple device to spell out what they want to say, because they can't verbalize things, right? Their motor skills are connected to their mouth. And they're finding, and the lady I had on, Laura Hirsch, she's written a book. Her son literally talks to animals, talks to deceased relatives, can read his mother's mind, can do all these amazing psychic and telepathic things. Like, for instance, he goes to this equine center, rides a horse, right? And the horse told him psychically that, oh, my best friend died. And I forget the horse's name, but he even gave the horse, the name of the horse. And he told his mother through the spelling to speech device. And she said, that's interesting. I want to verify that. So she went to the equine center and said, like 6 months before we got here, was there a horse named such and such that was with my son's horse that he ride? Oh, yeah, those two were inseparable. And that was the horse's name. How did you know that?
Wow.
The psychic, telepathic, autistic son spoke to the horse. And it's interesting how animals even use the names humans give them. To me, this proves what the Sharia Gilgum says. And many, again, parapsychologists will say the same thing, that literally the mind is an attenuator to navigate this three-dimensional five-sense world. And it's true.
I always say that, Jeff. Like, I do say that to people. I'm kind of left-brained and right-brained about it all. I say, look at the spiritual guys, look at the Kabbalists, look at their map of consciousness and the soul through the tree. Listen to Robert Monroe's tape. If anybody came to Robert Monroe back in the day and was like, hey, man, I'm spiritual, whatever, he'd be like, go away. We're doing scientific work. And yet, when he went through these things, his first experiences in his first book, what was it? A vibration, heavy magnet feeling. When he started to move away, he would these entities of just bodies all stuck together sexually, just nasty, gunky stuff, right? A sexual energy that he had to pass to keep moving further. He had to trick it to keep moving further. Think about that. These are two camps that don't talk to each other, yet they're saying the same thing. It's pretty crazy to me.
It is. And the spirits want to keep us locked in here. See, the magnetic forces of the material realms is what keeps us here. And then it talks about how there's many other realms. All the different sephiroths on the tree of life, which we astrologers call planets, are actually dimensional places that souls go to. There is an incredible book. It's a set of books in the Vedas, which is way, again, pre-Hindu. It is called the Holy Puranas. And again, I'm not demeaning any religion. I'm just saying these texts appear to be very old. The Vishnu Purana, which is in the first volume, there's 3 volumes to the Holy Puranas, and also the Mahabharata. And there's these texts talk specifically about lokas. Now, remember the movie Thor, Loki. Isn't that interesting? The screenwriter called him Loki. That means dimensional shifter. So they actually say there's 7 spheres of dimensions very close to the lower dense layers of Earth that souls go into. Many are confused, some are enlightened, some are seeking things. Daskalos talks about these astral, what he calls psychonoetic dimensions.
Right, yeah.
You see, he doesn't define them like the Vishnu Purana does, but he does a great job. Daskalos was very advanced. And I actually think no one can figure this out because it's beyond lower human serial thinking comprehension. In other words, our minds always have to make a reference to a diagram or to something we can model to wrap our heads around. And when you get into these other realms, it isn't like that. Consciousness is far greater than that. And it's really...
I wonder if that's why the trees are different, because Daskalos's tree is even different than the Hebrew's tree.
That's right. And there you go. And and I've seen many different trees. I've been creating a tree that tries to show the four worlds. And again, it's very hard to diagram something that is infinitely multidimensional into some way for us to wrap our heads around it.
Yeah.
Even physicists, they use math and all of that, which is great, but even that falls apart at some point because energy, matter, and consciousness supersedes analysis. We see the result of it, but
that's a good statement. What you just said: energy, matter, and consciousness supersedes analysis. At some point, we stop being able to measure things.
That's right. And you've got to drop back to divinity. And this is why all the really wise thinkers knew God exists, divinity exists. And I have to say, in this case, literally, thank God that does exist, because if the evil spirits had their way, they would break out and they would destroy creation in a nanosecond. They hate it because they're imprisoned in it. Look at an atom. You have positive protons and electrons. And of course, I know people are right. Well, but there's neutrinos and there's all these empty space. Yes, they're right. But it's all matter held in states juxtapositioned of positive and negative forces. What's holding that together? I mean, when you start going into what the hell is holding this incredibly complex divine creational machine that takes spirit and puts it into matter, now you're talking about the multiverses, the heavens, so to speak. It blows my mind. I'm actually working with an ephemeris right now. And for anybody that doesn't know what that is, that's what has always been used throughout history. An ephemeris is nothing more than a coded chart of where all the heavens are. And, there's many different types of ephemerises, but the one I'm working with actually can go back to 13,000 BC all the way forward to 17,000 AD. Well, do the math. That's 30,000 years of planetary positions. And to back this up, NASA uses it, JPL uses it. And I remember Robert Hand back in the 80s telling me about how they were working with JPL and NASA to design computer programs. And the astonishing thing that everyone's finding is the heavens are so synchronized. It's creepy. These planets, people, well, they got warbles and they go north and south. Yeah, okay. But the equinoxes and the solstices happen to the millisecond. Once you get past human calendars and human clocks, which have heirs, the celestial mechanics is stunning. It is the divine clock of creation. And now people say, well, geez, if you can measure 30,000 years of exact positions of where planets, stars, and all these things might be, and I don't think they can measure everything, but at least the solar system will say that, and many of the asteroids and all that, then how can astrology interact with us? Well, now enters time. See, when we drop out of mom's womb, or any other life does, or breaks a eggshell, or however they come into this place, right? The bottom line is time and space starts, and you cannot have time without space.
Right.
It's a measurable point to point. The Sefer Yetzirah talks about this. The Sefer is, of course, book, and Yetzirah means the multiverses. Yetzirah means formation in Aramaic and Hebrew. And it's a profound text. Mm-hmm. If anybody ever wants to read it, the best one is the one annotated by Ari Kaplan. Ari Kaplan died at 40 years old, and I think the guy wrote 80 books, definitely a reincarnated master, no doubt about that. But the Sefer Yetzirah, his commentary is worth everything in that, because he defines all these gates. Well, I actually make gemstone pieces where I can calculate the person's guardian angel from their birth chart. You take the inner 7 planets, when you drew first breath, the imprint of that, each letter shows up in a sidereal degree, and you extract that letter by expunging base 22, because there's 22 letters in the Hebrew language, right? So you extract that by base 22. So it takes time. You take the ascendant. See, the eastern horizon, where a person drops out of mom's womb and takes that first breath, that is where spirit concretizes. And we're all born somewhere, right? We're born in a town, born in, an airplane. I've had people born in taxis. They say, well, I don't know what time I'm born. Or my mom was on the way. I had another person, they were born on a plane. My mom had the water broke, had the baby on the plane doing 600 miles.
Man, I had a hard time believing that. But when you first showed me when we pulled up my chart, and I don't want to dig into my chart, but we pulled up my chart and you showed me, well, your ascendant's this. I got Saturn in the first chart. I got Libra rising, all this other stuff. Right. And then I was born on my Saturn line. And I got to tell you, every time I come back home, I'm working out some deep, and I'll just say it, deep shit. That's what it is. Every time I come back home. And it is right on my Saturn line.
It's right on it. Oh, I'm looking at it right now. I got your chart on the screen. But here's what's interesting about you. You have an exalted Saturn. And you might say, well, what does that mean? Well, Saturn's in its most powerful placement. It's in the sign of Libra, and that in the tropical zodiac. In the sidereal, it's actually still strong because it's with it's in Virgo. It's in an Earth trine, so it's still strong, and it's also with Mars. Oh yeah, you didn't get away with anything growing up, did you?
Do you? No. I don't. I'll never tell people what I went through growing up, man.
Oh, I'll bet you got your ass handed to you. My dad used to give me a skia. You know what a skia is?
No, what's that?
It's SKIA, a swift kick in the ass. That's what I used to
get. Yeah, I got you. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so here's the thing then, because we're getting towards the end of the broadcast here. These are always great broadcasts. Everybody loves them. I suggest you guys go back and listen to Jeff's channel, listen to all the shows he's done. If you want a super professional reading, please, do it with Jeff. It'll blow your mind. I still have my old recordings from ours, but the thing is what I'm trying to hint at is astrology becomes hard to believe for skeptics because this and that. And I know your journey has showed you so much. To us, the more I dig into it, it does kind of show like what you talk about all the time. And I think that you're kind of wrapping around this point that astrology and the spiritual stuff is showing you a system. And it's not even the full system. You're seeing the fronts of it as it works, like in perfect unison.
It's a divine, it's a divine spirit in time and space. It's really what it is. That's what it is. An astrology is not us. Modern astrology, everybody, I'm a Pisces, I'm an Aries. That's a bunch of modern Lovelite and clueless crap. It's not true. When you really break it down, and I like what you just said. I don't want anybody to believe anything. In fact, the last thing I try and do, if somebody doesn't want to do it, don't do it. You can live your life any way you want. I'm not here to tell anybody what to do.
Right, but there's definitely a case for it. Like when you look into it,
Well, there is. Yeah. If you want to look into it, almost all your finer minds in the Western Hemisphere and the Eastern Hemisphere definitely knew that it was a sacred science of the soul. And, I think it was J.P. Morgan said, millionaires don't use it, billionaires do. And proof of that is when you look at all the stuff that's going on, the world wars, just even in the last couple of centuries, they time things mysteriously to happen right when these major outer planet configurations come together. And we're in a time right now, even though I know if I say anything positive about Donald Trump, I'll get hate mail. I actually think there's some very powerful things going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. The rules are changing right now. The guy's really running this place at the top of the pyramid, and it ain't George Soros either. And I got to tell you, there was on one of my podcasts recently, I was playing how Scott Bessent was talking about how George Soros actually influenced the 2016 election. He actually made the market crash. And if you read that text I talked about, the Great Taking by David Webb, you can download it for free. I think it's still available for free. You just Google David Webb, The Great Taking. And he was a hedge fund operator, and he was good friends with George Soros. This is back in the 80s and the 90s. And he said, Soros used to lean over to him and go, everybody thinks I'm running this way. He said, you have no idea how powerful these guys are at the top of the pyramid. Well, this is what these texts start alluding to. If you think you own the shoes you got on your feet and the chair we're all sitting in, we don't. If the bankers ever called the debt, and this is part of what COVID was all about. Of course, we hear about Fauci and all this stuff, right? Fauci's the front man. He's just the whipping boy. And yes, he did do some really dishonest things. But when you look at what really that was all about, that was to bankrupt the Western financial systems. And boy, it did a good job. We just crossed 40 trillion, and I think we're a lot more than that. And you look at the entire floating crap game, it's every country is so steep. They're upside down in debt. When you look at their GDP versus what their debt is, I mean, you wouldn't want to run your life like that. I'll tell you that. You'd be in big trouble.
Well, who the hell are we? What I don't understand about that is, who are we borrowing from? Are you saying we're borrowing from these people, these entities that have been around running the show for a while?
You bet. This thing's all an entire floating crap game. Nobody has the collateral for these things. Now, to their credit, they do evaluate a country's resources. They're called special drawing rights, or they assess GDP and all this stuff. But yeah, I'd like to see the bank who could fire up the collateral if these loans were called tomorrow.
Because all I hear from people is like, well, we're just borrowing from ourselves. I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense. That we have to be, if we're in a deficit, we're borrowing from the reserve. Well, who's running the reserve?
It's the greatest monopoly that's ever been created in human history, is the financial systems. And they're shrouded in all this technical bureaucracy and protection. The Federal Reserve isn't any more federal than Federal Express. It's literally not even a government entity. It can't even be audited. They say, oh, we're going to audit them. Good luck. So this is a very mysterious thing. And it goes right back to England and Switzerland. And what's more mysterious here is it's also tied into this whole war machine and Middle East quagmire that's been going on. Even Afghanistan was in there, and so is China. The models with China was really what the New One World Order wanted. That was the proving ground. They want retina scans, barcodes on your forehead, and weld you in your house if you don't do what they tell you. So the Constitution of the United States and the Bill of Rights is the greatest enemy to the New One World Order, and it's really profound. I mean, when you look at the insight and foresight and really sacredness of the Constitution of the United States, it's really quite amazing, because it truly does protect anyone of any race, any creed, any religion. But it's also been bent around a lot by people trying to destroy it. And I think what's happening right now is we're seeing something far deeper than just Iran and all the stuff that's going on in the world right now, and China and Canada, all this. We're seeing a fight at the top of the pyramid for either globalism or nationalism. And people, it's a Strait of Hormuz and gas is high and all. Okay, fine, all right. Again, I don't think we're being told the truth. Our media is bought and paid for. I mean, these people are teleprompter readers. I mean, look up on the internet sometime of some of the salaries that your major newscasters earn. These people are filthy rich. That's because they're really good at reading teleprompters. And of course, they'll sit in front of their, in their little shows and bring on such and such expert and hash things over. And of course, they're propagandists. And a lot of them don't even know it. Because and some of their debating is good. I won't say they're all bad, but and I'm not singling out, but we definitely are in a psyops in a lot of ways. And a lot of what we're told is not verifiably provable. And I think a lot of things are going on where the cameras don't shine and the teleprompters don't report that is going on that's far deeper than we know. And I really think, when you look at the whole political scene right now, we are actually in a place where if we don't spend our way out of this and bring in the infrastructure back into the United States, get manufacturing up and running, they have sold us down the river. When I was a little kid, I mean, there was a machine shop on every corner. My
Yeah.
uncle had a machine shop with these huge belts, and he'd sit there with a broomstick, and he had lathes, and he was making railroad parts and all this. I mean, it was amazing. He had a steam engine, from the early 1900s. And this stuff now, the only thing you got is Walmart and credit cards and 7-Elevens. Manufacturing was ripped out of this country. It became service orientated. Yeah, we made some stuff, but I think give this time, and the 40 trillion could get wiped out real fast if we get this place back up and get it generative. And a lot of people right now hate Trump. They're like, oh my God, I voted for him, and he's bad, and this and that and everything else. And I'm not here getting into politics. What I am saying is I think there's forces and wars going on far above politicians. George Carlin was right. Forget the politicians. You have owners. They own everything. And that's where the real wars are being fought. And the political figureheads down below, a lot of them are doing what they're told to do, or they wouldn't be in office, or they won't be there long. I'll say that.
Well,
and
yeah, I get what you're saying. I wonder about fate, right? Like if you get into like you brought up Terminator. You remember when she wrote no fate. There's no fate except the fate we make in the table, right? And she's trying to change time, kill this guy. So well, we all as a society and people, because I hear things just like you do, we start to feel trapped, not only in a system, of reality, but in a financial system and all these different games that we're playing that seem impossible to get out of. And what I wonder is what does astrology's role in that? Is fate a real thing to you, or is it just something that we can fix? Like, can we take the weather and do something with it, or are we just kind of subject to
they're
it?
certainly modifying the weather, I'll tell you that.
Yeah,
Look at
right.
the chemtrails.
I set that one up good.
Well, I do. I really believe we are it's like a big Western. We're all just passing through. Our lives are so short. And, you look at these yugas and you look at time in reference. Yes, the average person lives about 80, 85, and when someone passes away, like Dolly Parton, the whole world takes a breath and notices,
Yeah.
So whenever someone well-known passes away, we really do stop for a second. We lose a loved one or even a pet. I mean, it's really, you realize how precious life is. But back to what you were saying, I do think we have free will, though most people will argue with me on that, especially when you start studying Vedic astrology. You look at these times and you go, wow, that's exactly when this happened or that happened. I mean, I have one client or several. I would look at their charts and go, oh my God, what happened to you at this age? And then the tears pour out. No, how did you know? Well, because you had a progression that joined a malefic at a certain age, so like you had primary directed Mars conjuncting your Saturn, Joe, right when you were probably about 9 years old.
Yeah,
somewhere right around there. Yeah, brutal, that whole area. I mean, all the way up till, I mean, man,
that's my point. Like, there are things in this life that make you feel, even though I've experienced the manifestation of things in my reality, there are times where I feel like, man, I don't want to have the prison mentality thing. I think, that this is all for a good reason. I have to believe that, but I guess what I'm trying to say is sometimes when you really look deep into astrology and the complexities of it, and you see like this matrix, this system you're talking about, it's like, well, how much control of my life do I really have? Right. And I'm not saying
I think we have 100% control over the reaction to it. And this is what, you were talking about earlier with astral travel and the Stoics.
Yeah.
Almost all your really advanced spiritual groups, whether it's the monks, the Tibetan Lamas, the Vedas, the Egyptians, the Kabbalists, whatever you want to talk about, they all really promoted one thing: your reaction to things. It's the ability to experience and react in a way. Most of your really successful CEOs, they're not that good at what they do. They're really good at managing people. They know how to put smart, intelligent people together and keep them getting along and accomplishing goals. That's the art. And that's maybe, the way that these ancients were espousing, is that you can't stop time and you can't stop karma and you can't stop energy. But like a good driver, if you clean off the windshield and you got your mirrors nice and clean and you see everything coming at you, your reaction is going to be a lot higher in vibration than if, well, this guy just pulled right out in front of me. Well, you saw him pulling out. So what did you do? You hit the brakes and you pulled out of his way. You see, so you avoided a very traumatic situation that could have been fatal, right? So, it's all about reaction.
It's a trippy thought, because Zen teaches that. Zen is all the moment, like trying to observe the deepest parts of every moment, which is, you think that sounds woo, but if you really get into it, it is kind of an interesting.
Doskalo, speaking of him, he actually brought up an example once. He had a premonition that I think somebody was on a bicycle, was going to hit him or something. And he said he presaw that, and he wanted to know if he could change the fate of that.
Right.
And what he did was, he said the event still happened, but the fact that he knew it was going to happen, he lessened the actual impact and it went past him. Well, that's a great analogy, because this is the same thing the yogis in India used to say. The seers, they would actually have converse with angels, and the same thing. A lot of your ancient astrology came from angelic conversations. And in fact, Rabbi Maharil said he used to have angels bring him books on astrology. And as fast as he read the pages, the ink would disappear. And he said, why is this happening? He says, because it's not allowed for humanity to understand this, because they have to learn this fate on their own. And a lot of it is to do with our conscious reaction to things. One of the most binding things, and this is what the religions were right about. Look at the Hatfields and the McCoys. There was just a doctor arrested yesterday, a doctor who was shooting a mother and her young, I think, daughter or sister or something, in a Jeep from road rage. You see, now this is a guy who went to school, got his college degree, went to med school, supposed to be healing people, and gets pissed off in a road rage.
One reaction changed everything. Yeah.
You bet. You see, now I can say this, and I can have, knee-jerk reactions. We all do. But the more we put an awareness on our perceptions of reality, and also living in a state of appreciation, like everybody's, the modern world sucks. Oh yeah? Well, I'll tell you what, worse. It could be a lot worse. Yeah, and let me tell you something. If you got a bar of soap and you got a shower, you got a clean bed that has, or air conditioning and heat, and you have garbage disposal or trash disposal, you got a sewer and water, you're way ahead of so many other people on this planet. I know there's one guy I work with in Naughty Astrology. They literally go to the bathroom in a hole in the ground. They live in a grass. They don't have electricity. They don't have water. They go to the fountain in the town to get water and carry it back in wooden pails.
Oh, man.
And we sit here in America and we're pissed off because, gas just costs so much. Well, I can jump in a vehicle and get 50 miles in no time.
Get a motorcycle.
And I can run to the grocery store tonight and I can get anything I want. It may not be perfect. Okay, great. So there's elements of society that's not perfect. But let me tell you, when that garbage truck shows up every week and hauls your trash away, if it didn't, you'd have rats infested all over neighborhoods. It'd be like the homeless. It'd be like downtown LA. But which is just like, God, I drove through there not too long ago. Oh my God. The stench, it's crazy the way these poor people live. And the government is facilitating it here.
Yeah. But, even the magicians would tell you, especially the traditional ceremonial, like Golden Dawn magicians are always working with the elements and the tree of life and stuff. But even then they would say in your journal, everything you do, Give me where the sun and the moon is. Just start with the sun and the moon. Write it down. And they're wanting you to observe how these things affect everything, you know. And then eventually you'd get into more planets, you'd get deeper into it. But it does, it's like the weather, right? Like you said, it's more like the weather of what's underneath everything than more of a system that's controlling everything, so to speak.
True. And another thing too is conscious gratitude. I mean, when we think about, like I was just mentioning, if you got a bar of soap, if you got a clean bed, if you have health, you know, you watch certain people. I know I've been helping a person right now who's had atrophy, and it is so challenging for this person to walk across the room. Can't even open a bottle of water. I have to help her open water and take out the garbage. You know, these are things we just jump up, run across the room, grab a glass of water, you know, flip on the light switch. We don't think about the amazing mechanism we have connected to these gray matters called our brains. And you know, the human body is stunning. It's absolutely stunning. And you see it in old people when it starts to fail or someone gets hurt. So there's a mindset that puts us more centered into the divine, because the thought form elementals we emit on a constant basis have a huge effect. This is why I think psychotropic drugs always end in disaster. Not always, but usually, because they disrupt the normal conscious flow of thought patterns. And yeah, okay, great. The person's not depressed anymore for a while. And then pretty soon they're blowing their brains out or they're killing their kids, you know? So we see this a lot. And I'm not saying that some meds don't really help people, but I've talked to a lot of psychiatrists about this, and it's not a healthy thing to stay on forever. You know, it may get you through something, but I've also find in astrology, I had a really fascinating situation with a young boy. The parents called me up, and he was in school. I think he was about 8 years old, and he was really having difficulty coping with the class and was having a lot of strange behavior and visions. So, of course, you know, enters the psychiatrist. Well, you know, we could put the child on drugs. And, you know, the parents called me up and said, well, you know, before we do this, we wanted to just see, is there any astrological correspondence to why this just started all of a sudden? And I said, well, first off, I can't give you medical advice, right? I'm not a doctor. I cannot tell you what to do with your child. But I said, what I do see is he had a secondary progressed Mars squaring Neptune. That is the classic. My mother used to tell me about these aspects. Mars and Neptune. See, Neptune is like the portal of the subconscious mind, and Mars is your energy, your ego, and also your crown chakra of energy. And I said, did this really come on strong right about here? And the mother, oh yeah, it's exactly when he started exhibiting this behavior. That's right when it got within about probably 45 minutes of orb in this progression. And I said, well, it's going to end right here, which was about 6 months later than they were talking about. And I said, I'll bet, you know, it's going to subside after that. And I said, now you can do whatever you want. You know, you're the parents, you have the right to do it. You know, you can listen to your doctor, whatever you want. But I said, if it were me, I would support this child, nurture him, and know that this is going to end. And you know what they did? They decided not to follow the advice and medicate the child. And they really nurtured him and told him, hey, you know, this is a time in your life where you're really experiencing a lot of different things about the mind and your you could say more expanded awareness of consciousness. And it's probably very hard for you to fit into this normal world. Guess what? The father called me up about 9 months later, because I'd forgotten about it. And he said, I can't believe this. I said, what happened? He said, well, we elected not to medicate the child. And he said, he cleared up right like about 2 to 3 weeks. It just went away. And it's right when that progression left.
Interesting.
And
wow.
Yeah, I've seen this in my own life. I've seen major transits and progress. See, solar arc progressions are really powerful. The Earth is a time machine. It's a time machine. And all of us drop into this matrix that astrologers call astrology, which is really celestial mechanics. And these interplays, or you could say celestial aspects, play out through what we call our, reality structure, which is life, our daily routines. And they bring major phases and changes in the life. And it's unique to everyone because we're all like tuned resonant chambers or tuning forks. So one cycle of Saturn for one person is going to be completely different than it would be for another. I've seen people on their Saturn returns win Oscars, or they get the breaks of their life. They become multimillionaires. I see other people on their Saturn returns. They're trying to jump off bridges, buildings. They're so depressed, So it's totally different. Like Saturn's transit of the moon is probably one of the most ingenious techniques in Vedic astrology. It's called sadhisate. And I've had a lot of conversations with psychiatrists about this. And what it is Saturn, which is really the karmic gunny sack, transiting for 2.5 years, the sign before your moon, the 2.5 years over your moon, and the 2.5 years on the sign after your moon. Every human being will experience this, probably 3 times in a lifetime. Some may even live to experience it 4. Why? Because Saturn takes 29.5 years to go around a person's birth chart. Interestingly enough, it takes 29.5 days for the moon to go around the earth and catch back up to a new moon. Something's going on here. 29.5 days versus 29.5 years. The soul trap, the mind. The moon is the lower conscious perception of reality in this dense physical world. And Saturn is the timekeeper of that. It's bizarre.
Even Carl Jung talked about that in one of his books, where he something about he dreamed he was dying or something. I forget what it was, but like he was going through a death and he was caught in this river and that he had no control over. But was the stream, he said, and I'll have to go find it because I talk about this all the time. The stream, he said, was governed by the moon. Like the moon was, like he was like a plankton in this thing. Almost until the moon decided to, like it was governing that, like our consciousness, basically.
I'm so glad you brought up Jung. He's was absolutely way ahead of his time, and he had so many amazing texts. He talked specifically about how the Earth has a soul. It's not just this rock with oceans and trees and people on it. I like George Carlin. He said it better. He said, the earth is a big dog and we're the fleas. He said, don't worry about the earth. It's us we got to worry about. Right.
Well, how can people get in touch with you, Jeff? I'm sure we'll get some first-time listeners that are intrigued. Like if they want to get a reading from you or get any work done, they just go to your website. Is that the best way to do that?
Yeah, that's the best way. If you just email jeff@jeffharman.com. It's HARMAN.com. And, that's the easiest way. And then we get right back to you by the email. And what I love about readings today is the Zoom. You can literally make a movie of your recording. And you can, not only do you see everything I'm talking about, I have a special pen that disappears that I can circle things and point to things. You get to see your astral location, your cycles throughout your life. And it's really an interesting look-see into things. And
I tried to help my friends with those dashas. And I was like, just talk to Jeff. And they're like, wait, tell me, is mine this or that? I'm like, look, I don't even know what half this stuff means. But all I know is that I got a Venus one coming up in 2030. That's what I'm looking for.
Yes, you do, my friend. Yes, you do. And that's good. See, that's in your air trine. See, now this is what's fascinating about these ancient techniques that the seers who were talking to angels knew about. And this is all based on the moon, believe it or not. And you were just talking about Carl Jung and the moon.
Yeah.
The lunar mansion that you're born in, and it gets, the Kala chakra is even deeper. There's actually reverse time zone karmic. It's literally like a reverse karmic time. It's like an antimatter or alternate universe time phase. They're called quantum leaps or lion's leaps. A lion's leap means you have a dasha that jumps 5 signs forward or backwards. It's a huge leap. And every single time I see it, life changes for that individual. And we all will get them, not everybody, but most people will experience a quantum, or what they call a horse step, which is a jump forward or backward, or two sides. It's absolutely fascinating. I got shown this years ago, and the guy who showed me was from India. And I said, this is going to take me 35 minutes to calculate this. And if I make one mistake, it's all screwed up. And he laughed. He says, yes. He said, it's very detailed. But he said, it's one of the most perfect dashas. So it wasn't until the last year and a half, I actually got a guy in India. He's created a program that does the Kala chakra perfectly. And even Parshar's light and a lot of the modern Vedic astrology, they don't do it right. It's not, because it's very complex. It's the lunar mansions literally leap in forward and backward time spaces. There's actually like a figure 8 where you have reverse time zones and forward direct time zones. What does this mean to us in plain English? Life. We sit here in life and go, well, I got divorced, or I did this, or I moved, or I did that, or I got this job, or this is happening to me. And you look at these time phases and you go, oh my God, this is right when this happened. And it's pretty bizarre because, again, you don't have to look at your life this way. But I find it's interesting because it gives you a different viewpoint on who you are and maybe the way you react to things, which could totally change an outcome. Yeah. See, people say we don't have free will. Yes, we do. We have the most powerful. What do they teach you in martial arts? The first thing they teach you in the military too, it's your reaction to things, your ability to assess and react. Those are the most powerful things in the universe. And that is the blessing of a human mind. And AI has that same trait, but not like we do. We have intuitive responses and we have deductive reasoning that is really quite profound. And that, I think we're all intimidated by AI because, it can do so much so fast.
Right. Yeah.
But it's a machine. It's a machine. It's not like us.
Yeah. I had to analyze a conversation, Joe Rogan and Thomas Campbell's conversation. And I said, tell me the arguments of Thomas Campbell. And it did it. It just did it in like 3 minutes. It was like,
it's smart. Yeah.
He's like, well, here's the issues with this and that. And I'm like, wait a minute. Did you just go through that whole conversation? It was like, yeah, I was thinking this is going to be something. Wait 5 years, 10 years, it's going to be incredible.
I said this back in 220. I said, you're going to see it get like the Jetsons here. And AI is just the tip of the iceberg. When you look at what's going on right now in like Skunk Works, which is just north of here. These guys are designing extremely advanced military craft, and it's not coming off an assembly line. They're literally making it with 3D printing and stereolithography. It's pretty advanced. And what's going on in underground labs and in black ops areas is stunning. And I really believe that we are, if you watch The Age of Disclosure, we've been reverse engineering and working with these. Eisenhower even said it. We're involved with them. Yeah. There's been military commanders who said they've actually been told if there's an all-out nuclear war, they'll stop it.
I believe it.
It's like Lord of the Rings. The elf people don't want the humans destroying the world.
I believe it. It was really, really great to have you back, Jeff. What do you got coming up next before I let you go? You're going to be on any more? I'm sure you're going to be on some shows, but you got a whole YouTube channel and podcast now. Let everybody know.
Yeah, the YouTube
because everybody
channel.
Loves your work.
I've been doing a lot of lives only because it's
easier that way.
It's just easier for me. I don't have time to edit, so I just throw on a live and go. And I have some really wonderful people that join me, and I always get a charge out of the comments I get. Some people are really funny, man. They really got some good comments. And that's a bore. So
y'all check out his
that's
website.
The other thing I love about humanity is, human beings truly have ingenious humor. A lot of us, we really do.
Y'all check out his website. If you get a thorough reading, just like you said, I've got the whole movie. I go back to it and listen to it sometimes. I've got my whole reading, and it's crazy how fast, Jeff can pull it up there. I'm sure you've got a massive list of clients, but I mean, I've really, really enjoyed your work. Can't wait to have you back on. Hopefully, maybe not too long from now, but man, whatever, we'll do it again whenever you're ready.
Yeah, that sounds great, Joe. I always enjoy you, and I love how you're expanding your horizons in so many ways too. I mean,
I got some stuff brewing for sure, but
awesome.
And I got some stuff brewing, and you guys make sure that you support Jeff. Go to his website, check out his YouTube channel. We'll put the links in there after the broadcast too, and also support the show. It really helps if you support the show too, because the Patreons are keeping us alive here. So I want to broadcast more, and any support you guys can bring will help that happen. But for those of you that listened on the radio station, God bless you. I love you guys. You're my favorite because you're my radio lovers. I love you guys. You have no idea. Trying to keep radio alive here on the Fringe FM. Jeff at jeffharman.com. Good night, you guys. We'll see you next broadcast, possibly tomorrow night. Y'all take care.
You bet. Thanks, Joe.
You bet, Jeff.
Okay, buddy. Well, that was a good show. Thank you.
Yeah, man. It was a good one. Yeah, man. Yeah, thanks. And anytime you want to come on the show, if you need help with anything, just let me know. All right. Oh yeah, I've been on this show. He said, dude, you're gonna get a lot of traffic from that.